Okay, good morning, everyone. It's 9:30, so it's high time to start. Welcome at another Interreg online question and answer event. This time we will concentrate on coronavirus response investment initiative packages and the implications on the Interreg programs. My name is Grzegorz, and together with Gosia, Katja, and Robert from Interact and our EC colleagues from the European Commission, in the next 2 hours, we hope to help you better understand provision of both regulations in the Interreg context. Having said that, I would like to introduce and welcome our colleagues from the European Commission, our co-hosts of today's meeting from DG for Regional and Urban Policy. Ursula Romańska from Policy Development and Economic Analysis. Good morning, Ursula. And Dirk Peters from Cross-Border Cooperation and Internal Border Units. Hello, Dirk.
Hi, good morning.
After both CRI packages were published, respectively in March and April this year, we received from programs many requests to organize a question and answer session to discuss how to implement both regulations in the Interreg environment in the most efficient way. Also, on the side note, as some of you already know, in Interreg communities, in thematic network for financial program management in forums, there's been set up a separate thread on COVID-19, and you can find pretty much a lot of interesting information as well document connected with the CRI packages. Before we begin, let me explain briefly how we are going to proceed in the next 2 hours. During the first part of our session, our colleagues from European Commission will answer questions collected by Interreg during last 2 months. And in the second part, you will have an opportunity to ask additional questions, plus some extra explanations. To do that, we will use one extra online tool and you will need your mobiles. So just please keep your mobiles next to you. Some more practicalities. As you already know, this event is recorded, so it's going to be also published on the Interreg webpage. And so also due to the recording, also to prevent to limit the background noises, we mute most participants. Also, we are not using the chat box today, as all the questions we are going to be passed through the online tool that I mentioned, and how we are going to use it in details. We are going to explain it a little bit further. So, not too long, let's start with the first question, like a first introductory question to the topic, and I would like to ask Ursula to say us a bit what in practical terms are the most important consequences and flexibilities that CRI packages can offer for the Interreg programs.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. I hope you are safe, I hope you are in good spirits, and I hope that you will find the session interesting. And I will do my best to reply to your comments with the help of my colleagues. And of course, if there are further questions or questions that I cannot at the moment give an answer, we will of course follow up bilaterally after the meeting via the system that I will as well describe a bit to you. So let's start with the packages and have an overview of the packages. And basically, in order to support member states and regions in responding to the COVID-19 outbreak, the Commission proposed 2 packages, and the first one, yes, here you can see the content of the first package, which was more like an initial emergency response. And we aimed at providing additional flexibility and budgetary liquidity. In terms of flexibility, we decided to extend the scope of support under the European Regional and Development Fund First of all, to address the most urgent needs in the healthcare sector. So the investment priority under the thematic objective 1 was extended to cover investments necessary for strengthening the crisis response capacities in health services. And this would cover health equipment, medicines, treating facilities or testing facilities, disease prevention, e-health, provision of protective equipment, medical devices, or investment in infrastructure in order to adapt environment in the healthcare sector or ensure access to healthcare for vulnerable groups. So that was the part for the healthcare, but of course we quickly saw that the COVID-19 outbreak has as well significant consequences for the businesses, enterprises, economic and social consequences. That's why we decided to provide liquidity to businesses in terms of supporting working capital in the SMEs. As a temporary measure, and where necessary, in particular to focus on these sectors which were particularly hard hit. And this support can be given via the grants, via repayable assistance, or of course financial instruments. In addition, the expenditure for the COVID-19 related operations would be eligible as of the 1st of February 2020, so that we could already cover the expenses made before not only our proposal was put on the table, but as well before our proposal was adopted and entered into force. Because we knew already that, especially in the case of the most hard-hit countries like Italy, these expenses were already incurred and paid before March. In addition, we as well proposed to allow for small transfers within programs within the same fund and category of regions to be done without the Commission's approval, and we will delve into it in more details when responding to some of the questions that we have already received. And the last key point was providing additional liquidity. And this was done through not recovering the 2019 annual pre-financing this year, and as well by speeding up the payment of the annual pre-financing for this year. And in addition, we decided to as well extend the scope of support of the European Solidarity Fund to cover public health crisis as well. And now let's move to the second package, the Coronavirus Response Investment Initiative Plus, which was built on the first proposal, on the first package, but it became clear that additional flexibility and liquidity is necessary, and that this will as well be an opportunity to simplify some relevant procedural steps. So this proposal was as well quickly adopted in a really probably record speed as the first one as well, and already entered into force on the 24th of April. So this proposal proposed to provide additional liquidity through giving the member states a possibility to request the 100% EU co-financing rate for the expenditure declared in the next accounting year, 2020-2021, for ERDF, ESF, and Cohesion Fund. As regards the flexibility, there are 4 measures. First of all, it's possible to transfer the 2020 resources between the cohesion policy funds, regardless of the minimum shares of the ESF or the minimum allocation for the cohesion fund, as well as it's possible to do it to transfer resources between the categories of regions. But here we wanted to make sure that still the member states take into account the fact that cohesion policy's treaty goal is to support the less developed regions. So really to think twice before moving the resources from the less developed regions to the transition or the more developed regions. In addition, from now on, there will be no more checks on thematic concentration. And maybe I should here add that this point is probably more relevant for the investment and growth and jobs goal, but here we as well wanted to safeguard the allocation for the European territorial cooperation. So that's why maybe here is more important for you that there will be no more checks of thematic concentration, while the transfers are rather the maybe a broader context. In addition, we introduced a measure that may already be well known for you because it was as well used for the closure of the 7-13 programming period. So there's a possibility to have the 10% flexibility at closure within the program as regards the EU contribution at the priority access level. And we'll look at it as well because there were questions on that. And in addition, as regards the selection of operations, we decided that in the case of the COVID-19 related operations, it will be possible to select operations that are so-called retrospective projects. So physically completed or fully implemented. So these projects can be selected, while normally they would not be, it would not be possible. And in addition, such projects can be selected even before they are covered by the program, before the program is amended with the approval of the Commission. It's in order to speed up the process and as well to cover the operations projects that take very quickly to finalize, for example, purchases of the PPE, of the medical devices. In addition, the last element of the flexibility is to allow support for undertakings in difficulty under the very same conditions as are now applied under the state aid rules and the de minimis rule. So in order to make these rules, the approaches the same, aligned across the two sectors, you could say, so the cohesion policy and the state aid and de minimis rules. In addition, we decided to provide some simplification. There will be no more amendments of the partnership agreement from now on. No more amendments of partnership agreement. We decided as well to simplify the use of financial instruments through not requiring to adapt the ex-ante assessment or to provide a business plan. In addition, we made it clear that the COVID-19 can be a valid reason to use non-statistical sampling in audits. Next, we as well postponed the deadline for submission of the annual implementation reports. So instead of submitting them by the end of May, they can be submitted by the end of September. In addition, where the COVID-19 outbreak is invoked as a reason of force majeure in terms of submitting the payment applications, and what is really important for the decommitment rule, information on the amounts for which it has not been possible to make a payment application shall be provided at an aggregate level by priority for operations whose total eligible cost is less than 1 million euros. So, so this is the overall view of the package. And now let me as well tell you a few things about the Coronavirus Response Investment Initiative Task Force, because the task force was set up in the Commission in order to assist member states in implementation of the two packages. And basically it's managed by DG Batch. And it was the functional mailbox was set up where the managing authorities may send in questions. and the questions are then distributed to the relevant DGs and the teams that were tasked with quick response, quick replies to those questions, and the questions and answers are then published on a dedicated platform on SharePoint, which is accessible to all program authorities. Basically, since the mid-March, we received, well, now I think it's actually or around 430 questions, and more than 400 replies were published. Actually, today I finalized one of the replies, and it was it's just about to be published. So this is really it was a great effort from our side, but of course it's the effort is to make your life easier and the member states' life easier and in these difficult times. So the thing is that there is a lot of questions and answers already on the platform. So please check the platform first before submitting a question. Of course, when we receive a question that is already replied, we point out to the relevant reply. However, it's as well maybe, well, the SharePoint website is not the most easiest to browse through because, for example, it's not so easy to search through the keywords. However, what you can do is to download a page as a PDF file. There is a button that does it really just quickly, and you can download, for example, all the questions regarding the structural funds and the horizontal questions or the ERDF, and then search the keywords in the PDF file. This is probably the easiest way to search the SharePoint website. And now let's go to the next slide.
Actually, I would just maybe, because then we are going to, let's say, to another question. Actually, this is one more information from my side is actually that also the link to this dedicated platform you can find also on the communities that I was talking at the beginning. So please have a look there. And one more question to Dirk, whether he wants to complement or we can proceed to this next question.
Well, that's a question for you, whether in how far the CRII and CRII Plus apply to the different forms of Interreg apply. I should do it now or later. I think it's maybe better now before we go to the individual questions.
Okay, please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, well, it won't be many slides because the principle is very easy. All what Ursula just explained does apply. So CRII and CRII Plus apply 100% to ETC programs where the amended provisions apply to ETC. When you work with the Q&A platform, there's already also an information that wherever a reply refers to the member state shall do this and that you have to read it in the ETC context as, of course, the member state hosting the program authorities or the MA acting on behalf of the program partnership. So all ERDF amendments, yes, they apply. The transfer flexibility that will be explained later in more detail does apply, although then the CRII did not amend Article 8.12 of ETC. Don't ask me why, it has never been explained to me. And the CRII only amended Article 96. Sorry for the typo, it's of course paragraph 10 CPR, but when an Interreg program comes with an application based on 35, we will treat it and we will disregard that Article 8, para 12 was not amended. So anything on eligibility as of 1st of February 2020, yes, applies. No recovery if there was need in the exercise of the annual accounts, yes, applies. co-financing rate of the reimbursement between the Commission and the programs. Yes, we will come to this later. This does not mean that each individual project has a co-financing rate of 100%. Thematic concentration, yes, because Article 25A, para 5 says that in accordance with the fund-specific rules, and Article 6 ETC is the fund-specific rule on thematic concentration for Interreg. Early project selection, so you can select projects before the program is amended, yes. You can invoke force majeure and group the projects below 1 million, I think it is, when there is a problem with the expenditure declared by the end of this year, and we will deal with this early next year, yes, applies. Extension of the deadline to present the annual implementation report to 30th of September, yes. The auditors who cannot go to check on the spot now, they can then base themselves on a non-statistical sampling. Now I have something in my view. Yes, this applies, and also the 10% flexibility at the end of when closing the last accounting year. So that's and what is not mentioned also applies, but it's not relevant. How does CRII and CRII Plus then apply to transnational programs with regard to the IPA and ENI allocations inside? So with regard to IPA, and here we talk about the 4 programs listed, this is exactly the same situation as in the previous slide, because this is governed by Article 26 ETC, so that ETC applies, and that the specific implementing rules are set out in the financing agreement. And if you check them individually, you will see that the financing agreements make a broad reference to ETC regulation and the CTS and the CPR. Of course, the IPA CBC regulation does not apply, but ETC directly. Now, when it comes to ENI in the transnational programs, we have to distinguish between the Baltic Sea region on one hand and the Danube on the other hand. For the Baltic Sea region program, it's exactly as in the previous slide, and also the same as for IPA set out above. The financing agreement sets out that the ETC regulation applies. Again, the ENI CBC regulation, of course, does not apply to the rules of the program. And when it comes to the ENI allocation inside the Danube program, you know that this does not come from this ENI CBC envelope, but from ENI mainstream. That's why Article 26 ETC does not apply. And you have to check for the 2 countries concerned what actually is the situation with regards to the financing agreement. But I suppose, again, it refers broadly to the ETC regulation, and then all the CRII Plus would apply. Next, please. So now with regard to IPA CBC programs, there, of course, we have to work with the regulation 447, the IPA CBC regulation, which in its Article 33 makes a global reference to ETC and the CPR. So wherever that regulation refers to CPR and ETC, of course, then CRII and CRII Plus apply 100% also to IPA CBC. There are 2.5 exceptions, because CRII and CRII Plus amended provisions that actually in the corresponding provisions in IPA CBC are outside the chapter which refers in Article 33 to CPR and ETC. So this concerns the 100% co-financing rate. So that's why a specific act on EPA CBC is in the pipeline. This is covered in EPA CBC in Article 28. So you see it's outside that chapter. It's before Article 33. So we will then amend that article by introducing a new paragraph, and the substance is 100% copy-paste from Article 25A, Para 1 CPR. The next issue is the transfer flexibility under 35 CPR, and this has to be made apply to EPA CBC by introducing a new paragraph into Article 31. Again, you see it's before 33. And this is 100% copy-paste of the substance of Article 30, Paragraph 5. And in addition, we clarify that the existing paragraphs 31, 2, and 3 shall not apply, because that says, that talks about observations and so on, things that we don't need here. And I said 2.5 provisions, because we thought that the amendment in 25A Para 5 CPR on thematic concentration would need an amendment in the EPA CBC regulation, because they're governed in 29, but it's so broad, and all the programs were consulted, and actually we came to the conclusion that the programs are broad enough that they would not need to have a fifth priority, and so actually Article 29 of the EPA CBC regulation is not amended. So much on this. I will not explain in detail, because the ENI CBC programs had a specific event yesterday, organized together with the colleagues and TESIM. So CRII and CRII Plus shall not at all apply. That's why a specific act amending the ENI CBC regulation is in the pipeline, and it's almost finished.
Thank you very much, Dirk, for this explanation. Also, thank you, Ula. And I think that right now we can carry on to the next question that we already started to talk, and that's concerning the commitment limits. As some of the programs already indicated that they might have that might be an issue for this year. I mean, already, Ula, you in your presentation you already touched that actually that in some cases the COVID-19 can be referred to as a force majeure following the procedures of the Article 87 of the CPR, talking about the exception to the decommitment. Is it always the case, or it should be treated like a case-by-case approach? Could you elaborate on that more?
Yes, of course. Just to ask about the presentation, because there will be, maybe it's easier for the other participants.
Yes. We are back.
So let's just put that one on, so that we can have a look at the replies. But in general, the reply to the question is actually, and the options that you presented is actually the second option, meaning that what we have to approach every single force majeure case separately and individually. So so first of all, maybe just let me say a few general points that we hope that apart from helping to respond to the COVID-19 crisis, two measures that we proposed will as well facilitate faster absorption or any absorption imbalances. So first of all, the application of the 100% co-financing rate in the next accounting year should be one of those measures, especially that it can be applied to any priority access, and then it covers all expenditure declared under that priority access. It doesn't have to be a priority access that is specifically and exclusively linked to the COVID-19 response operation. It can be any priority access. Similarly, with the 10% flexibility between priority access at closure, there is as well some additional room for maneuver. But coming back to the force majeure, so as regards invoking force majeure, and in the context of the decommitment at the end of the 2020, and in accordance with Article 87, paragraph 1, point B of the CPR, the relevant information should be submitted to the Commission by the 31st of January 2021. So there is a month to do that. And the authorities claiming force majeure shall demonstrate the direct consequences of the force majeure on the implementation of all or part of the program. And you are as well aware already that the second package, the CRII Plus, added the possibility to aggregate the information on the amounts for which it was not possible to make a payment application by priority for operations that the total eligible cost is less than 1 million euros. And maybe a few points on the force majeure itself, because we as well, of course, had many questions on that and how to approach it, whether it's possible to do more like a blanket invocation or use of this clause. We had to, of course, consult internally with our lawyers. And so in union law, the notion of force majeure generally presupposes circumstances which, 1, are abnormal and unforeseeable, B, are beyond the control of the one claiming force majeure, and C, could not have been avoided despite the exercise of all due care. And so that's why you can see that this has to be assessed on a case-by-case basis. So all three conditions set out by the Court of Justice have to be fulfilled and properly demonstrated. So force majeure may be conceived even more restrictively under the national law. So this has to be as well taken into account. And the Commission considers that careful analysis and flexibility should be given to all cases where there is a failure by beneficiaries to fulfill obligations in a timely manner for reasons related to COVID-19 outbreak. And here we can think of the unavailability of staff due to quarantine in a country because of the outbreak, for example. And equally, the Commission will follow the same principles in assessing the compliance of the member states, of the program authorities, with their obligations. So in any case, it's as well very important that all due care has to be taken to avoid, mitigate, and minimize the consequences of this event. So otherwise, there's no extraordinary approach envisaged. And at the SharePoint website, we have dedicated sections for the COVID-19 and force majeure, as well as for the decommitment.
Okay, thank you very much. That leads us to, let's say, the other question, actually, because already we have spoken a bit about the 100 co-financing rate that we are going to elaborate a bit further on that, and also the 10% flexibility rate. But there's also two rates that were introduced by the 460 concerning the transfer of money between priority access, means precisely 8% and 4%. And I know that actually some programs have some questions about it, particularly how, if they are transferring money, how properly calculate this, the transfers. And also there were some additional references also to this 10% flexibility, but probably also on the time scale. So could you elaborate on that?
Yes, so that would be yes, on the next slide. And indeed, we had a number of questions, and coming from both the ETC and the mainstream programs, to know how that will work in practice. And basically, So it works like a double limit. So it's the 8% of the allocation of the outgoing or giving priority, and no more than 4% of the program allocation. And this is a total for all transfers. So if one priority can give a total of up to 8% of its allocation to another priority via transfers. It can be one transfer, it can be more transfers. So it can be a transfer, like it can be 3 transfers, so 2%, 4%, 2%, and this in total gives 8%. However, it cannot be like the one transfer of 8% and then another transfer of 8% or 5%. Like once the 8% is reached, this is the end for the priority, and it cannot give more. Then the sum of all transfers cannot exceed 4% of the program budget, and this concerns the EU contribution, the EU allocation of the fund. This is easier for the ETC because it's the ERDF, but this as well concerns a lot the mainstream, which can be multi-fund, so there were as well questions on that. And so this means that if the 8% of a given priority is actually 4% of the program allocation, no more transfers. This is the only transfer that can be done, or like this is the limit. And the other thing is that these transfers will not affect previous years. Of course, mathematically, it is anyway not possible because usually while the commitment for an annual commitment is more around 15%. However, it's more to give a clear signal that that only the resources for 2020 can be transferred. And the reason is that it's set out in the financial regulation that only the open commitments can be moved. And and according to the financial regulation, it's only that this year commitment is open, not the past annual commitments. And again, of course, this means that it's not possible to use the transfers to circumvent the N+ rule, for example.
Okay.
And then, in practical terms, how to do it, how to apply it. This requires some changes in the tables 16, 17, and 18 of the cooperation program, while no need to change table 15. And this as well means that this is the only change that is actually necessary. And as regard, but of course, I can some of these changes can lead to some knock-on effects on other elements of the program, but this I will tackle in another question. And as regards the link with the 10% flexibility at closure, there's actually no link. These are two separate measures, meaning that the transfers of the 4% can take place only during the programming period, during the implementation, while the 10% is at closure. So these are not interlinked in any way. And with regard to the transfers, we as well have a dedicated section on the SharePoint website.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope right now everything is clear. And we are back once again to this 100% co-financing rate, because yeah, I must admit, actually it sounds tempting, right? Actually, when we hit that, but that's actually the questions were concerning. I mean, on the one side, because it refers to the accounting year, accounting year that's going to start in this July. And then also it refers to directly to the expenditure, and questions appeared whether this, how it's linked to operations, whether there should be, let's say, there is any link, meaning, for example, only for the operations they are going to start, or for example, ongoing operations that actually they are expanding with new activities. Referring to the COVID, or that's also and how it's also linked to the eligibility rules.
So the co-financing rate applies at the level of a priority access and to all expenditure declared under that priority access during that accounting year. So it's not at an operational level. There is no link. It's not limited to any types of operations. not new. I mean, it covers new ongoing operations, so any expenditure declared for the indicated priority access. And as I said, it can be applied to any priority access. The reason is that this measure aims at financial liquidity, improving, giving the member states the capacity, the financial capacity to finance, to front load resources and to finance the necessary investments, and to alleviate the pressure both on the program, but as well on the national or regional budgets. So this is specifically the purpose of it. That's why it's not linked to any preconditions or any scope of support or any priority access. All priority access can be can benefit from that. And in practice, this means that the program will require an amendment, a standard program amendment, but it can be processed quickly, because all that is necessary to be done is to indicate the relevant priority access in table 16. There will be an additional in the SFC, and I think in the SFC it's already uploaded, additional column added to the table 16, where you can tick the relevant priority access to which you would like that the 100% co-financing rate should apply, and very short justification, basically indicating that this is necessary to improve the liquidity, and we will process this this request as quickly as possible. And then but it's necessary, it's important that this program amendment is approved by the Commission before the final payment application for the accounting year 2020-2021 is submitted, because only then we will be able to pay all the resources accordingly. Because with the accounting system, with the annual accounting system, this is necessary. So basically, from the practical side, you have a bit of time to do this, but of course, the sooner it's approved, the sooner you will get additional resources, and at the latest, they will be available with the final payment application for the 2020-2021 accounting year. And then, in order to go back to the current co-financing rates, all that is necessary to do is a notification. So this will be an even quicker procedure, just a notification, and that's it. What was as well very important for member states, and we received a number of questions, and we are still receiving questions, because I think that it's, as you said, it looks very tempting and almost too good to be true, but it is, that there's no need to compensate for with additional national contribution in the next years. Basically, as a result, the real co-financing rate will be higher, the EU co-financing rate, while the total volume of investments will be lower than initially planned, if the co-financing rate, the national co-financing rate and the EU co-financing rate go back to the current levels. Of course, this is not this is the consequence. Of course, if the member state or the program authorities, they want to maintain the volume of investments or increase the volume of investments for any reasons, this is as well possible, of course, by lowering the EU co-financing rate after the temporary increase. This is still possible. However, it's not requested, it's not required, it's not an obligation. So this is important, and that there is as well no need to let's say bring the financing plan to try to match the financing plan with the reality, with the real co-financing rate. I mean, we just go back to the co-financing rate. The simplest option is just to go back to the current co-financing rate and roll with it, and we will know through the system which priorities had the 100% applied, how much was paid, and that's it. So this would be the simplest way to do this. And we as well have a dedicated section on the co-financing rates and the Article 25A, paragraph 1 CPR on the SharePoint.
Okay, thank you very much for this in-depth explanation. Yeah, it sounds super tempting. And but also referring to what you already said, let's say it's somehow linked to another question concerning the changes in program, because still actually as you already mentioned, some of the changes will be required and will require approval by the Commission if program would like to open for the operations responding to the COVID-19. Meaning, so you already mentioned actually that you try to speed up also the approval of the program. So whether you are following some kind of the extraordinary procedure, or it's just like a it's just the approach for now on, that everybody knows that actually that we need to speed up.
Mm-hmm. So first of all, it's important to note that the two coronavirus response investment initiative packages provided some flexibility as regards the COVID-19 operations that can be used even before the program amendments. So this covers the transfers of the Article 30, paragraph 5. This covers the retrospective date of eligibility of expenditure, the possibility to select projects that were physically completed or fully implemented, as well as the extended scope of support for the ERDF. And so these can be already used, but as well at some point in time, probably it will be necessary to amend the programs, but we recommend to amend the programs once a full extent of the necessary changes is clear. So it's so first of all, you can make use of these possibilities of these measures, and select and keep track of the COVID-19 related operations. Make sure that they comply with the applicable law, which is important because apart from the from additional measures or some changes, the whole remaining legal framework is in place, and it's important to ensure that the operations are indeed in compliance with the applicable law. But expenditure can be included in the payment application only after the program amendment is approved. So it's as well important that you look at the impact of these operations on the program and identify which procedure should be followed. If it's in line with the standard program amendment, if it can be done via the notification, for example, adjustment of the categories of expenditure can be done via the notification, but changes in terms of the description of the priority access requires the standard program amendment, or that the indicators require a standard program amendment. And as well, what is the room for maneuver for the transfers of Article 30, paragraph 5, so the 8%, 4% transfers. And that, as I indicated before, the transfers may require a follow-up program amendment to adjust the indicators, the description of the priority access concerned, etc. For example, the beneficiaries, the types of actions. And then it is up to the program authorities to decide when, about the timing of the program amendment, when it should be submitted. And we will do our best to deal with the program amendments as quickly as possible, while the deadlines for the program amendments were not changed, but we will make all the efforts to speed up the process. And we want to, that's why it's really important to have a close cooperation between the program authorities and the relevant and our country teams, so that we can move quickly through the motions of the procedure. And as well, there is a dedicated section for the program amendments for the details, and some specific issues are then there targeted and answered.
Okay, thank you very much. And talking a bit more about the operations, actually, I know that actually that these days actually programs are facing the lots of changes in the operations. Actually, the projects are submitting a lot of changes to programs because of yeah, because of the delays, because actually the projects actually are unable to let's say follow the originally planned activities. There probably will be also the problems to meet the originally planned objectives and outcomes. Program institutions would like to help operations projects to implement. Also, it's particularly important in the Interreg programs where cooperations requires partners from both from at least two countries, sometimes even more. How on the basis of both packages actually how the program institutions can additionally use these packages to support operations? Any good tips and tricks on that?
Well, first of all, it's as we tackled a bit the force majeure, and that's why it's really important to that all due care is taken in order to minimize the impact of the force majeure, and this is important in terms of then the decommitment rules and so on. So that's why, unfortunately, I have to start with this major point that. Yes, this will be a very intensive period for all of us, and probably for you, mostly for the program authorities, to try to address these issues and treat the problems on the ground. So, but looking into the possibilities, so where the execution of contracts is impeded because of the COVID-19, for example, due to unavailability of the key staff or products or subcontracted works or services. This may be considered as force majeure. In such cases, it is up to the program authorities to assess the situation and allow for substitute performance or delayed performance. So this is possible, but you have to ensure that you have the proper documents supporting that. And program authorities may consider adjusting operations, for example, in terms of the deliverables, the time limit for the execution, etc. So in even what was indicated in the question, yes, some forms instead of real meetings in reality can be transferred to the virtual reality and be done online if possible. And but here we also have to make sure that you follow the appropriate rules for the program in the case of the mainstream programs as well the national rules. And it's really important to minimize the impact of the force majeure. And as regards the eligibility of expenditure, it is mostly defined at the national program level, except for the rules that are defined in the CPR and the specific regulations. And maybe for the mainstream programs it's less. I think for the ETC it's a bit more detailed in some cases. For example, as regards the staff costs, there are a bit more details and common rules. But it should be noted that the legislative framework is in place, is fully applicable, and we have to ensure that the rules on management and control systems are followed, including the requirement to set up procedures to ensure the adequate audit trail. And we have to make sure simply that the regularity and the sound financial management principles are ensured. And it has to be, as regards the force majeure, it has to be checked whether the operations were really impacted, and it's not just taken for granted. It cannot be just taken for granted, but we need to have some backing for that. And any new contract and or modification of the existing contract under the operation at stake have to be in line with the public procurement rules as well, where applicable. And of course, the member states may, or the program authorities may may adjust the operations in terms of as well expanding their scope to cover additional COVID-19 related operations, or to save what can be done and save what is possible to be saved, or then to as well redirect the resources to new operations.
Super, thank you very much. I'm just wondering, Dirk, would you comment on that? Because from how it would, let's say, how we see, let's say, from let's say our ETC perspective, our ETC particular kind of projects, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, it's really just complementing because what Ula said, of course, applies. The only issue with ETC is that we have more eligibility rules defined at EU level because, well, you have at least two different member states around the table, and just applying national rules is not pertinent. So Article 18 of the ETC regulation has set up a hierarchy of rules, and program authorities are allowed to agree in the monitoring committee, but if there is need by written procedure, to agree on program-specific eligibility rules where there is no such rule in the EU rules. And of course, there is no EU law eligibility rule which says we can pay for events, the cost for events that could not take place because of the coronavirus measures. So the programs are free to set a rule that under certain conditions linked to the corona measures, expenditure is considered eligible, although events could not take place. And this is perfectly possible. We have examples from ETC programs who did so. And the aspect of extending the project lifetime, this is something each program has to do. There are no EU rules on that. And it's then up to the ETC program whether the MA can do this because there's a mandate from the monitoring committee to do so, or the monitoring committee has to take a decision. I'm personally desk officer for the Radio Mass Rhein program, and they organized quite quickly a written procedure to extend all ongoing Interreg projects by 6 months. And even those already, well, close to closure, they got another 2 months to draw the final project implementation report. So these are things that are possible and can be organized by each ETC program.
Okay, Dirk. I one more question actually that will lead us to, let's say, to the final question. However, despite all the, let's say, measures that were implemented by the programs, and still program will see that actually that there might be a risk of like underperformance. When and how should they should contact you? I mean, whether there will be like some kind of a special, I call it procedure channel, or where I mean, just to, let's say, be in like to, let's say, to make sure first programs will follow, let's say, all they can to support and to, let's say, to support their operations, or there should be somehow of the connections between programs and the Commission right now if there's some kind of the underspending, underperformance, or threat.
Mm-hmm. So the current channels of communication remain valid, and they are open, and of course we are ready to provide the support. And what maybe the next slide will as well add some details. Yes, thank you. So So yes, so basically here there's no change, but of course we are ready to support. And usually the sooner we know about the issue, the easier it is to find the solutions. But I think it's as well important here to tackle on the broader underperformance of the program. So in accordance with the procedure laid down in Article 22, paragraph 7 of the CPR, on the basis of the final implementation report of the program, the Commission may apply financial corrections, but only when there is a serious failure to achieve targets of the performance framework. And what a serious failure is as well clearly defined in the implementing regulation on the performance framework, but as well only when the serious failure was caused by clearly identified implementation weaknesses. So just the occurrence of the serious failure does not mean that the Commission has to apply financial corrections, but there has to be, those two conditions have to be met. And still, the Commission only may apply financial corrections. And what is as well important is that the third subparagraph of Article 22, paragraph 7, CPR sets out that financial corrections shall not be applied where the failure to achieve targets is due to the impact of socioeconomic or environmental factors, significant changes in the economic or environmental conditions in the member state concerned, or because of reasons of force majeure, seriously affecting implementation of the priorities concerned. Consequently, the Commission will consider in its assessment whether the financial correction should be applied or should not be applied. And that's why the data and the evidence used to estimate the value of the targets will be essential in that assessment, so that we can see what was the impact of socioeconomic and environmental factors and all those significant changes or the force majeure. And you know that for the performance framework targets, we have this data or the methodologies of calculation. So then we can as well use that. This will be very useful. And so this kind of thinking has to go into the whole process. Mm-hmm. What is as well important is that there is a possibility to amend and adjust the indicators of the program in the performance framework, because there was the difference between the indicators outside of the performance framework could be adjusted more easily, while in case of the performance framework there are some limitations to that. So still, point 5 of the Annex 2 of the CPR clarifies that that member state may propose a revision of the milestones and targets through a program amendment, the standard program amendment, in duly justified cases. And then we have a list of those. So, or examples of those. It's not a exhaustive list. It's just the examples. So, the significant change in the economic, environmental, and labor market conditions, and when it is a consequence of changes in allocations for a given priority. So, in these cases, the milestones and targets, well, in this case, it will be targets, can be modified. So, this as well should be taken into account, and we will be as well eager to work with the programs in order to minimize the impact, but as well still work towards the goal of making sure that cohesion policy can in an effective and efficient manner support the regions in these difficult times. So this is important to still make sure that the resources provide as many benefits as possible.
Okay, thank you very much. Dirk, would you complement?
Yeah, I think this issue is linked to just the issues we discussed in the previous slide. by giving the necessary extension to the projects, the underperformance can be reduced or avoided considerably. If the final event as part of an important milestone of an Interreg project could not take place, but if you as planned these months, but if the program grants the extension by 3 or 6 months, then the event then can take place in autumn. In most countries, this will be possible, maybe not yet in June, but well, from July to December, there are still 6 months of this year, 2020, where physical meetings can take place, and so by using the flexibility on extension of the projects, I think much of underperformance can be avoided or at least considerably reduced.
Thank you very much. Ula, Dirk, thank you very much for your answers so far. I mean, this is the end of the first session, so all the answers collected by us have been answered. And now it's the time for the part 2.
Yes,
Shall we maybe start with?
I think we can start, and other questions colleagues can put at any time.
Okay. Yeah, the first question is about 100% co-financing, and seems that the program would like to use this as the liquidity for the program, but not actually paying 100% to the projects. So somehow keeping the 100% co-financing at the program level and pay projects as described in the contract, I assume. So what do you think about this idea?
So I mean, this is not a completely new idea, because sometimes even the state aid rules prevent from giving a certain, I mean, set a limit to the public contribution. But what is important that this is possible. However, of course, by closure, it's necessary that the public contribution paid out to the beneficiaries is at least equal the EU contribution. So all the resources that were reimbursed from the Commission have to go to the beneficiaries. They don't have to. It's possible that the support from the EU funds will be less than 100%, of course, but eventually they have to go. All has to go to the beneficiaries. So it's not possible to pocket the resources and pay only a share of it. No, by closure. All EU contribution have to go to the beneficiaries.
Dirk, would you like to complement this?
Yeah, it's really about increasing liquidity. So for each payment claim, the program will get paid by the Commission more than under normal circumstances. And this money should not stay on a bank account of the MA, but should then hand it over to the beneficiaries, even if it is as an advance payment. We know that ETC programs have a problem with that, but the issue of any payment is to hand it over to the beneficiaries. Even though advance payments made to beneficiaries cannot declare to the Commission for reimbursement, it helps the normally smaller beneficiaries under Interreg to get the projects going on. And again, with my own program, Origo Maas-Rhein, so they will ask for this 100% reimbursement by the Commission, but there was a fierce discussion in the Monitoring Committee on what does it mean as co-financing rate for the project. And they finally agreed to go as high as 90%. Because for political reasons, they thought it's important that the beneficiaries come to the projects with some own resource, also to enforce responsibility for the public money. But there is no obligation to do that, and well, many programs are at the maximum of 85% that is allowed under ETC anyway. But okay, my program was at much below that maximum of 85. But for the COVID projects, and they are doing a specific call, they will go up to 90%. So the things are interlinked, but the 100% reimbursement has a different purpose than just increase the co-financing rate on individual projects.
Okay, thanks a lot. I hope that clarifies it. Next question on the list seems to be about the what is exactly meant by COVID-19 expenditure in the context of the eligibility of such started 1st February this year. And is it valid this date, 1st February? Is it valid for everybody, for every program or region, even if they are not somehow touched by the COVID, which I don't really believe?
The 1st February date is relevant for all member states, regardless of the timing of their lockdowns, because the impact of the COVID-19 outbreak on the healthcare system and on the small and medium-sized enterprises, for example, could be felt regardless of when the official lockdown was introduced or what were the rules of the lockdown. So it's the 1st of February for all, but it's for operations fostering crisis response capacities in the context of the COVID-19 outbreak. So it's not for, of course. So this is the possibility simply to cover these operations before the entry into force of the first and the second coronavirus response investment initiative packages, because they entered into force March and April. So in the end of actually in the 1st of April and then the 24th of April. So in order to cover the expenditure and the purchases that happened already before these dates, that's why we introduced the specific 1st of February date. This date applies regardless, for example, of the changes in the program, because we as well have a general rule in Article 65 that when the new expenditure is introduced via program amendment, this new expenditure is eligible from the date of submission of the program amendment. But here we have a derogation, so it's always the 1st of February for the operations fostering the crisis response capacities in the context of the COVID-19 outbreak. So of course, these are the type of expenditure that was allowed for via the first coronavirus response initiative package. So that was the extension under the TO1B investment priority, as well as the working capital support for the SMEs.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Dirk, any other comments to that?
Yeah, well, I don't know why it's a bit difficult to understand what an option is, what a possibility is. It's not an obligation. So expenditure is eligible as of 1st of February 2020, full stop. But programs can decide that they do not go back that far. So, for instance, again, my program, they said, well, it's Belgium, Netherlands, Germany. There was nothing in February, so they decided that for the specific call they will launch these days, it starts on the 1st of March 2020. So these are the possibilities you have. So options is not an obligation.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, thank you. The next one on the list, quite popular, it's about maybe not COVID, but also related. But what about the future? What about 2014, I mean, extension of the current period, possibilities of such extension in the light of current situation?
We believe that it's not a good idea to extend the programming period 1420. And because basically the new resources are most of them the new resources are in the post 2020. So there is a limit to how much we can support, how much resources we have available for the 1420, and in order to provide the much needed, especially now, the economic boost that is necessary for the economies at the local, regional, and national level, we need more investments than we have resources in the 1420. So that's why we don't want to prolong the 1420 programming period. This is true that the transition provision was proposed by the Commission for the Common Agricultural Policy, for the EAFRD. However, their situation as regards the post-2020 negotiations is really completely different than ours. For cohesion policy, the negotiations of the post-2020 legislation was progressing very well until the recent lockdown and the situation simply making it difficult for the technical meetings between the co-legislators to continue. However, especially for the Interreg regulation, the progress was very good, and the trilogue was very effective and productive. So we believe that it is still possible to finalize these negotiations by the end of the year. And as well, in our case, the progress in programming is as well substantial on the ground already. So member states, regions are already working on the new programs. So for us, this would be really detrimental for our policy to extend the programming period, especially that the final eligibility date is the end of 2023. So there is still a lot of time to finalize the projects and try to still make a full use of the 1420 resources. I believe that we believe that it's much better to think about as well the future and to make use of those resources that are there. Of course, this depends on the negotiations of the MFF for the post-2020, and there are a lot of question marks here. And hopefully, very soon, we will know. We will all learn what the Commission will propose for the change, because we all know that there is a change in the pipeline. However, this should not stifle our work on the post-2020, but rather we should try to, as much as possible, accelerate. And it depends on all of us to make sure that that we can start with the post-2020 implementation as soon as possible, maybe with a slight delay, but it's much better than to have the extension of the programming period. I mean, the kind of a mess that we would have with the transitional provisions as were proposed for the EAFRD, it's really, it would be really detrimental for the policy, because just the scale of this kind of extension would be really, first of all, the kind of changes in the CPR and the fund-specific regulation that would have to be introduced would be so big. And just imagine having to negotiate this provision, any transitional provisions, and post-2020. I mean, this would lead to major delays for the post-2020 because everybody would just focus on the transitional regulation negotiations, and the post-2020 would be put aside. So we believe that it's still possible to finalize, especially with our progress. Basically, by in the December for the CPR, we had already blocks on programming, on management and control, and on enabling conditions agreed. During the Croatian presidency, we managed to substantially progress with the negotiations on the eligibility, on the monitoring, on the financial management. Basically, we even started with the very last block of the CPR that is outside of the MFF negotiations, meaning that the definitions. We had the first meeting. So that's why we believe that it's still possible for the CPR to be finalized. It's indeed a bit more cumbersome for the ERDF Cohesion Fund regulation, but this one is shorter, so we hope that we can have a breakthrough there. But especially for the ETC regulation, that would be a pity because there is really a serious progress made on the Interreg regulation post 2020. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Dirk, would you like to add something here?
Well, there's not much to add. I mean, it was very well explained. I mean, in most countries, the lockdown was or will be more or less 3 months, and we still have 42 months to go. This is 7% of the remaining time to implement projects. So it's really not the moment to talk about extension of the program period 14-20.
Okay, thanks. The next two questions are, I think, more or less correlated with each other. First is about the 100% co-financing, and then that actually the program will get more money than it's defined in the program budget. And the second one is about the 100% co-financing and then reaching N+3 because, I mean, bigger probability of reaching N+3 target because of getting more money.
So as regards the first one, no, there would be not more funds. It's rather that you will get it more sooner. You would get sooner and in bigger bulk, but the overall total of the EU contribution to the program remains unchanged. So it's rather that basically it's rather that the national contribution will be as well smaller because it would be replaced by the EU resources up to the 100%. But like the allocation remains the same. The EU contribution to the program remains the same. It's simply that you will receive it faster, sooner than you would receive it before, and you would not have to provide as much national contribution as initially planned. Because there is no new money at the moment. There's no new money. We are just simply paying you quicker, sooner, more than initially planned, but the total will remain the same. As regards the second question, in terms of reaching the N+3 target, yes, because basically you will use up the commitment sooner, quicker, simply. Yes, this is exactly the case because we would calculate this. Yes, because you will get faster, more resources, so it should be easier to reach the N+3 targets. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And the next one is also somehow connected, but it's rather tackling the. Can we use this extra payments for just to avoid negative interest, which program are having at the moment? Some programs are facing at the moment, keeping European money on the bank accounts. So is this possible to use this money for paying this?
Actually, just yesterday we received this money. I think it's from the North Sea program, and we are just about to put it through the motions of the procedure, and we'll come back to you. So we have registered this program, this question. I will actually deal with this question. So please give us some time to come back to you with a detailed answer on this one.
Okay.
Well, as we just said on the previous question, this higher liquidity is meant to forward these payments by the Commission to the beneficiaries. So it should not create a negative interest, because it means that you did not forward it to the beneficiaries. Even if it's advance payments to make the projects go on faster, because the beneficiaries don't have to pre-finance. So we don't want to see that money coming back, because it means that the management on these payments was not done correctly. There should not be negative interest, because it means the money is staying on your bank account, and that is not on.
Yes, yeah, it's possible to introduce the option to prepay or to introduce advance payment for the projects as well. Yeah, of course. But yeah, the next question is about the MC decision needed, or is it needed to have such a decision to allow controllers to accept travel costs or other expenditure related to the cancelled trips and travels and events. So I think it's program by program, but I wouldn't say it's necessary to have a monitoring committee decision. But what do you think?
To be honest, I don't feel I'm not that deep into the rules for the ETC on the staff cost and this kind of cost. So maybe Dirk can help here.
Yeah. Well, I tried to explain. Article 18 ETC sets out a hierarchy of eligibility rules. The highest level is our EU law rules, including those in CPR, EIDF, ETC, and the Delegated Act 481 from 2014. So in these rules, you will not find a rule that says expenditure on something that is not real, that an event that did not take place, a travel you did not do, is eligible. So that rule does not exist. Now, this can take into account force majeure. The travel could not take place, the event could not take place, and still you think as a program it's not okay that the person, the organization, has to remain with this expenditure. That's why an eligibility rule which says this cost is still considered an eligible expenditure under the program, with some conditions. You have tried to get it reimbursed by the air company and so on. So there can be some conditions, but if in the end you have to pay and there is no real product for this expenditure, it's an eligibility rule. And program-specific eligibility rules on issues that are not regulated by EU eligibility rules have to be agreed upon by the monitoring committee. Okay. So unless the monitoring committee has delegated this to the MA, but I would find this a bit strange. And I mean, with a written procedure with 5 working days, this is not a big deal. You don't have to have a monitoring committee meeting.
Yeah, thank you. The next one is about the regarding the 8% and 4% flexibility, someone is asking what does it exactly mean during the programming period? Is it about 2020 only, or yeah, because as the program, someone says here quite rightly, there are no annual allocation per priority axis.
So the thing is that the flexibility of the 8% of the 4% can only be done when the 2020 commitments are still open, and they concern only the 2020 commitments. And indeed, there is no annual distribution of the allocation per priority, but there is the annual distribution for the program, for the whole program. But this is only to say that only the 2020 commitments can be used for that flexibility, not the 2019, not the 2018, not the 2017 allocation, but only this year, and it's possible to be done this year because then the 2020 commitment will be closed from the perspective of the EU budget. So that's why this should be done this year. And yes, so I hope that this answers your question. That's why the provision on the previous years does not stemming from the financial regulation, not really from the financing tables of the program, but this comes from the fact that only the current commitments, budgetary commitments from the point of view of the EU budget can be moved, but not the past, not the commitments for the previous years. And we are now in the final year of the programming period, so this has to be taken into account as well. That from the budgetary point of view, for example, yes, for the cohesion policy we have the N+3 rule. However, the usual rule for the EU budget is N+1. So that's why our N+3 works a bit different than the other for the other policies, especially in the direct or indirect management. However, this possibility is open currently, but it will not be open in the 2021-2022.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. The next one is about the not delivered activities or not reached outputs, or an influence on that for the indicators at the program level. So I don't think there is a clear answer to that, but
yes, because it depends on the case by case whether the deliverables can be exchanged for the different ones, whether the how the operations could be modified in the very specific case, because it has to be looked at this case by case basis. And probably Dirk will be able to help you more with the practicalities, but I just would like to underline that it is possible to adjust the contracts to replace the initially planned deliverables with the modified deliverables. This is as well possible as long as the rules of the program allow for that, and this can be reflected in the indicators for the program as well. And probably this is inevitable in many cases, not only because of the underperformance in the operations or the change of the substitute changed performance, but as well because of the new operations clearly related to the COVID-19. So that's why the indicators can as well be amended.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, as said before, you have different instruments to avoid that deliverables can actually not be implemented. One issue is to extend the project lifetime. So when something was planned to happen in the last 3 months, by extending the project lifetime, you give them another 6 months to do it. If this is not an option because well, the event can or whatever, the deliverable cannot be done anymore, then the program could think about amending the project in that respect. And then it's for the program whether this is considered a major project amendment that the monitoring committee has to approve, or whether this is something the MA can decide on its own. But I think these tools can help to get as many deliverables as possible. And as explained by Viola with regards to the indicators in the performance framework at closure, when certain targets could not be achieved with all measures we were explaining today, then we are still far away from a financial correction for that reason.
Thank you. Someone is asking if technical assistant priority access can be also used for this 100% co-financing, and I understand that yes, because every single priority access can be used for that. Okay, we have nodding.
Yes, correct.
Okay, good. Thank you. And then the next one is about the co-financing rate. If the co-financing one of the priorities is 85%, then next year it will be, I mean, next accounting year it will be 100%. Then will ERDF payments will be adjusted in the following years. So for the whole period, programming period, it will be 85%.
No. the short reply is no, because in fact, by applying the 100% co-financing rate in the next accounting year, and then going back to the 85% for the remaining year, the real EU co-financing rate for the whole programming period as such will be mathematically higher than 85%. Of course, it depends how much expenditure will be reimbursed based on the 100%. And in a proportional manner, the real one will be, the real co-financing rate will be more than 85, but this is not a problem. This is not a problem. And now maybe just a few technical notes here. Why it's good to come back to the 85% after applying the 100%? It's because when the Commission is paying the payment applications, we apply the co-financing rate indicated in the financing plan. So that's why we would go back to the 85%. And at closure, this does not create any issues, even though if you calculate how much actually you received, it will be higher in percentage-wise than 85%, because the national contribution will be in proportionate manner lower. But let me underline here that this is not a problem, because actually in the CPR, in the Article 25, paragraph 1, we have the relevant derogation that for that period the co-financing rate can be higher. So that's why, as a consequence, of course, for the whole programming period, it will be above these percentages, these maximum percentages as well. But this is not a problem. So that's why don't worry. And yes, so they don't have to be adjusted. You can go back automatically to the current co-financing rate, unless for any other reasons you want to change the current co-financing rate, then it's necessary to have a program amendment.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next one is connected with the, again, 100%.
May I compliment?
Sure.
it's again linked to the issue of what is an obligation and what is an option. It was clearly explained by Viola that there is no obligation to compensate with national co-financing, but you can if you wish. But there is no obligation, and as there is no obligation, then of course, what is clearly set out in the CRII rules, after this accounting year, you go back to exactly the co-financing and financing table that was in vigor before, and that means over the 7 years, you end up at a slightly higher co-financing rate than 85%, unless you compensate, but there is no obligation to do so.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and also connected with that is the question about the if 100% is for COVID-related projects or activities projects, and then the other projects not covering COVID, as I understand, will have to get a bit less of ERDF to have the final ERDF to stay constant or as planned.
The 100% co-financing rate will apply to any eligible expenditure declared in the 2020-2021 programming period for the priority access to which this high co-financing rate applies. So it will cover any projects, including, for example, technical assistance. So and then when it comes to but there is some truth in the less element, but not at the project level. It's rather that if we go back to the current co-financing rate, this means that the total volume of investments will be smaller than initially planned, and this means that you may have to have less projects than you planned initially, or that you would have to maybe rebalance the co-financing. However, it does not require, of course, as said, compensation. But yes, the ERDF will always contribution to the program will remain constant. It's the national contribution that will decrease. And what does it mean? It depends on the given program and the project, probably. So, and the situation of the beneficiaries to some extent as well, and the relevant rules. So this is difficult to say. It's not the case that it will always mean that you will always have to give less. It's just that you will have an overall that you will already have reimbursed more ERDF quickly already in 2020-2021, and then the impact of that on the projects that are happening in the next years has to be addressed on a case-by-case basis depending on the projects.
On this, it was clearly explained that it's a choice of the program to which priority or priorities in plural this 100% reimbursement applies. So it can be just the priority where you do COVID projects, but it can be all, including TA. So that's a choice of the program. So the 100% is a liquidity tool, and it's created in the context of the COVID, but there is no link between the 100% and COVID-specific projects.
Okay, thank you. I think the next one is North Sea, Christian from North Sea, saying that the program has to have some money on the bank account to cover the projects claiming resources from the program. So we just
yes, I think that because I remember because Dirk didn't have yet opportunity to read the question that we have received, and the thing is that if I understand correctly, that the North Sea program actually implemented all resources, and there is an over-programming, and actually it's about the 2019 annual pre-financing that was not recovered, and you would be happy if it could be recovered, because so that it does not generate the negative interest. I think that was that is the problem in this very specific case. And we will look into that and come back to you with the answer. So yes, we will look into this problem.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And the next one is about the changes in the cooperation program. Which tables, which budgets, or which tables in the cooperation program should be changed to change the program into usage of 100% of co-financing?
Yes, this is the table. I think it's the table 15. And let me just double check the number, because I remember for the mainstream programs. But it's the table 16 for the cooperation programs, where you have the distribution of the allocation per priority access, and where the co-financing rate is indicated per priority access. There will be an additional column added with the title 100% co-financing rate, and the little boxes where you can tick the relevant boxes to indicate that this is the priority access to which you would like to have the 100% co-financing rate applied. So this is the only table that has to be changed, plus a small line of justification, because it's normal that for any program amendment you have to have a small justification, but we will not dig into that justification. This was clearly stated by our Director General during the negotiations of the second package, that we will process these requests as quickly as possible, because the main reason is the financial liquidity. So we will not be digging into why this priority access and not the other priority access, or why all the priority access. We will not be digging into this. So this is all that has to be done to apply for the co-financing rate of the 100%. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I think we have a last one, but however, it was already confirmed, I think, many times today, that the final confirmation that 8% and 4% can be used starting this February 1st and can be used until the end of this programming period.
I think that the problem here was that for the 8% and the 4%, as the basis for calculating those 8% and 4%, we use the allocation as of 1st of February 2020. So I think that this question is addressing this issue. And yes, indeed, I mean, but this is used only the state of the tables in the program, in the financing plan of the cooperation program. As of the 1st of February 2020, we will use them to calculate the 8% or the 4% limits. So, so this is more just to say, okay, this will be the one moment in time for all programs, that this is how to use the figures to calculate the 8% and the 4% for the limits. And but this can be applied only this year because after that the 2020 commitment will be closed from the budgetary perspective.
Yes, thank you. I think if Dirk doesn't have anything to add to that, I think we are done with all the questions.
Wow.
No, well, it's just if you compare the provision on the 100% co-financing, it clearly says this can only be applied during a specific accounting year, whereas the amendment to Article 30, Para 5 does not set up such a limitation. So the limitations are built in the text as such. But it was explained in the beginning and now by Ola. So that's how it is.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So thank you very much. It's perfect timing, I would say. It's 5 to half past 11, and we are done with all the questions. So just to wrap up, thank you for. So I hope that actually this for the last, I mean, in 2 hours we answered most of your questions, and right now you've got, let's say, all the full knowledge about the both CRII packages and how to use them. I would like to thank you right now for all your questions, contributions, participation for the last 2 hours. Big thank you to Ula and Dirk for being with us and explaining in very detail all the answer and uncertainties. And also from my side, big thank you to my colleagues from Interreg, Gosia, Katja, and Robert for co-hosting all the event. Last but not least, before you leave our virtual world, my big request from my side is that after like a couple of minutes, you receive the email with the evaluation survey. I mean, as you already know, actually your feedback is really precious to us. So please do spend 5 extra minutes and to fill it in, what you liked, what you didn't like, just to make us better. And thank you very much for your attention and have a good day. Bye-bye.
Yes, thank you very much as well. I hope that was helpful for you. And if you have further questions or concerns, of course, do not hesitate to contact us. And I wish you a nice day. Bye.
And some of the transnational colleagues we will see again in the afternoon.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, and thank you very much for the very good organization. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.